Today we're going to take a look at the Dolphin wireless keyless entry for your garage door opener. If you have an older garage door opener with a linear Delta-3 radio receiver attached to it or a multi-code model 1090 attached to it, then stick around as we go through step by step on how to program the keyless entry to your radio receiver. Let's get to it. Let me just start off by saying that if you don't already have a Dolphin keyless entry, I will put a link to our website down in the description below where you can purchase one. That being said, let's get on to programming. So the Dolphin wireless keyless entry is compatible, like I mentioned earlier, the linear Delta-3 DR radio receiver and the multi-code model 1090 radio receiver. You can program your own personal 4-digit PIN number into the keypad to operate the door, and it runs on a 9-volt battery. Now your radio receiver, if you have the Delta-3 or the multi-code, they use dip switches for the programming. And in the Delta-3 there are 8 programmable dip switches that can be switched to either on or off, and in the multi-code radio receiver there are 10 dip switches that can be flipped on or off. So the first thing we want to do is write down the number of the dip switches that are in the on position, and this we'll use later during the programming of the keypad. So if you look on the back of your operator, you should see the radio receiver attached by 3 screws, and if you just loosen those screws you'll be able to pull the radio receiver off. Now you turn the radio receiver over and you will see a small hole in the back of the Delta-3 receiver, and inside you will see the 8 switches. And the same is true for the multi-code. It's going to be mounted on the back of the operator, and if you turn it over you'll see the model number. To just double check you have the right one, it should say 1090-20. We also call it a 1090, and it'll say multi-code on there. But on the front of this one is a small door, and if you use a thin blade knife you can pop that door off, and inside you will see the 10 switches. In a lot of the receivers the switches are upside down when it's hanging on the opener, so if you turn it this way you can read it from 1 to 10 going across this way. Once you locate the switches on your radio receiver, write down the ones that are in the on position or open position. And in this particular one for the Delta-3, the 1, 6, and 7 are up, which is the on position. All the other ones are down, which is the off position. And the same is true with this multi-code one, where 1, 6, and 7 are up and all the rest are down or closed. So once I realize which ones are in the on position, I just write it down, so I have this written down for me for later, which is 1, 6, 7. After you get those switch numbers that are in the on position, you can go ahead and reinstall your radio receiver. You won't need to use it anymore. As long as you know exactly which ones are in the on position, you won't need to look at it again. So go ahead and reinstall the radio receiver to the back of your operator. So the next step is to set up the keypad so it can be recognized by the radio receiver. And to do this, if you turn it over on the back, there's a small door here, and you just slide that down and it'll come right off. There are 3 elements inside the back of the receiver that we are going to be looking at and adjusting to work with our particular radio receiver. So in this particular demonstration I'm going to be going with the linear Delta-3 and programming the keypad to it, but the instructions are going to be the same for the multi-code. So if you're looking at the back of the keypad, on this side there are 4 pins in there with a plastic jumper. Now this plastic jumper goes over 2 of the pins at a time, and this is for selecting the frequency of the radio receiver that you're using. The linear radio receiver uses 310 megahertz frequency, while the multi-code radio receiver uses 300 megahertz frequency. So if we're going to program this one particularly in this setup to the Delta-3, The 310 megahertz pins are closest to the side, while the 300 megahertz pins are closest to the center of the keypad. So there is a plastic jumper inside. It's very small, has two holes on the bottom that go over the pins, and I'll put a picture there so you can see it. I'll take this jumper and I'll put it on the two pins that are closest to the side, because that's the 310 megahertz, and I'll just slide it down over those two pins so they will connect, and the keypad will now be working on 310 megahertz, and it's set up for the Delta-3. If you're going to use set this up to a multi-code, then you'd put it on the other two pins. The next thing we'll look at are the pins on this side of the keypad, and there's 3 pins in a row, and these 3 pins, when you put the jumper on them, will tell the keypad how many dip switches that you're going to use. So as I mentioned earlier, the Delta-3 uses 8 dip switches, while the multi-code receiver uses 10. So we'll pull this. It has the same plastic jumper on this side. So if you're going to program this to the Delta-3 radio receiver, you want to put this on pins 1 and 2. And if you're going to program this to the multi-code radio receiver, you will put the jumper on 2 and 3. Now that we have those two things set up with the pins, the last thing we need to do in the back here is set the dip switches. Inside there you will see 10 switches, and for this demonstration I am doing it with the linear, so I'm only going to use 8 of the switches. I don't have to worry about 9 and 10, but if you were going to program it to the multi-code, you would use all 10 switches. So earlier I wrote down the ones that were in the on position, which was 1, 6, 7. So I take a small screwdriver and I go in here and I push up for 1, 6, and 7, and then I push all the other ones in the down position because I know they're off in my radio receiver. So now my keypad is set for programming the pin number that I want to use. So before we program our personal pin number in here, I just want to test it to make sure that it works. And to do that, we're going to press the star button, and then the factory default pin number, which is 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we're going to press the pound button down on the right hand side. So we hit the star, then 1, 2, 3, 4, and then press pound. And at that time your operator should run. So if it's running, that means you've got this set up the way you want. And then we'll move on to programming your own personal pin number in here. So now we're going to program our own personal 4-digit pin number into the unit. And for this demonstration, I'm going to say 5, 6, 7, and 8 is going to be my personal pin number. So what we want to do is we want to hit the pound sign down in the lower right here twice. So we'll hit that twice. Then you enter the default number, which is 1, 2, 3, 4. Then my number, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then hit the pound sign again. So now my number is in there as 5, 6, 7, and 8. So we're going to want to test that out to make sure that it took it and it's working. So to try it out, you just hit the star, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then pound, and your operator should run. If your operator didn't run during the when you put in the default pin number or your own pin number, then here's a couple of troubleshooting tips that you might want to try. First is the battery. Make sure you have a strong battery in here. They come with a battery from the factory. We don't know how long they've been in there, so it could be weak. But if it is weak, when you press any button on the keypad and the lights don't come on for the numbers, then you should change the battery. This is a good battery. All the lights come on when I press it. The next thing is to double check the jumpers and the switches in the back. Yeah, it's very small and it's hard to get your fingers in there sometimes, especially for larger hands. And if you're pushing it down, you got to make sure it goes over both of the pins that you're putting it on, and that you're on the correct pin number. So go back and double check, make sure those are both installed on the correct pin numbers. And finally, you might want to clear out and return back to the default of the keypad. So if you've been messing with the numbers a bunch and you just want to set it back onto 1, 2, 3, 4, what you do is you open up the bottom part where the battery is, remove the battery, disconnect it I should say, and then you're going to want to hold 1, 4, and 7 on here. Then reinstall your battery while still holding those numbers, like that, and then let go once the battery's reconnected, let go of those. And so that clears out all the codes inside there except for the default number, which is 1, 2, 3, and 4. So if everything back here is correct and you put in your star 1, 2, 3, 4 and the pound key, your operator should run. And then go on to the next step to enter your own personal PIN number. If you have any questions about the Dolphin wireless keyless entry, you can email us at youtube@garagedoorzone.com. We hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, and we'll see you on the next one.